My name is Mike Festa, and I have the honor of being the State Director for AARP Massachusetts. I also want to let you know that as I listened to the earlier panel, I had memories brought back to me. They all came in waves. There's a series of experiences I've had. But the first one, and it is my background, my first job at a law school was being a prosecutor in Middlesex County. And that was the very ancient days for me. In fact, my first boss was John Kerry, so that ought to give you an idea how long ago that was. But my memories of being a prosecutor, and we're just talking to Rachel briefly and listening to other panelists, I was thinking to myself, you know, part of what I want to talk about today is the candid observation that we should not delude ourselves in thinking that the solution to fighting fraud is in a courthouse, or is in a DA's office, or is in a police station, or our friends with federal government, state government. They are our allies. They are fighting fraud in ways you heard today, and most of us are quite familiar with the mission. But the sad truth is that if you as a victim of fraud are having a conversation with a police officer, having a conversation with any of these good people, you've already lost the fight. That is true 99% of the time, in my humble opinion. Now, why am I saying that in this, kind of starting off in a negative? It's because I think it underscores the critical mission we all have to fight fraud in its inception or before it creates that victim. And I think instinctually we recognize that. So, I also want to comment on the fact that I hope you've noticed my green tie. It's not left over from St. Patrick's. I just found out this morning, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but the solstice, this equinox, is actually today. Not tomorrow, because it's February 29th. The leap year pushed us. So tonight is, in fact, the beginning of spring, and I'm celebrating. Because I'm one of those gardener types. I can't wait for the flowers. So, with that out of the way, I want to say that I want to give a shout out to the folks over there to my left, your right, the AARP volunteers. These folks, I'm going to be mentioning a little bit about what we do, but I want to specifically call your attention to the fact that most all of what AARP does in this area of work, and frankly most every area of what we do, relies on volunteers. Relies on volunteers that have been well trained in what they're doing. And when it comes to presenting a fraud, how to avoid being scammed, et cetera, AARP has folks like these four good people who have gone through a serious training program. And the mission we have at the level of these volunteers is, frankly, to get out in community. We're back down to more of the personal conversations rather than just the online. I was saying to a couple of people when we were having lunch, there's nothing more effective, frankly, than a personal conversation and a meeting where a lot of the good questions that are asked are after the speech or after the presentation, right? When people want to talk about their situation, want to ask a question, but they don't really feel good about it in a big public setting or even a smaller group, right? So having these in-person meetings and opportunities is something that AARP believes is something we need to get back to, and we are doing that more and more. So thanks to our Fraud Watch volunteers for their work. Now, I also want to put in a plug. Because AARP relies on volunteers for this and a lot of other community work and advocacy, which I'm not going to talk about today, but let's just say we do a lot of lobbying, federal and state, on a lot of issues like Social Security, Medicare, et cetera. If you're interested in becoming a volunteer, talk to any one of them. They'll give you an idea. It's a lift that you can be comfortable doing at whatever pace you want. But the one takeaway, and it is something I think that resonates in this group, the training is really important. We don't want people getting bad information. We don't want people feeling that they've gotten only part of the story or inaccuracies in that process. So we take that seriously, and in all our volunteer presentations, we certainly do that. Now, let me return to that point about why, it suddenly occurred to me when I was having lunch, why it is so important to have these in-person meetings, if at all possible. It does speak to the other thing that I think is absolutely a reality out there, and that is people do not want to admit they've become a victim. The vast majority, and I'm included, who the heck wants to tell your own family members that you just squandered a savings account or you've just been in some way victimized? It's a really hard thing to do, and human nature is such that we will circle that wagon real quickly because and you know, it kind of goes in a lot of different directions, but here's the one that comes to my mind at AARP and the work that we do with seniors. You know, a human being presents a complex picture, right? Now, how about a person who got caught up in a scam, a romance scam, a grandparent scam, an IRS scam, and at the same time, they're having conversations with their kids about, you know, Mom, you're kind of losing it. Maybe you should lose the car keys. Maybe you should no longer do your banking. So they've got that in their head already. They're under a lot of pressure. And then you ask them to admit to their own children that they made a mistake. Now, it's really important, I think, to acknowledge that because the lack of disclosure is the friend of the scammer. The unwillingness to come forward and forget about going to family, but anyone, is a barrier that is incredibly high to overcome, and it is the fraudster's best friend. And why I emphasize that is because I think we're all in this room on a mission, whether it's in our own personal lives or as those who are professionally engaged in the business of preventing fraud, to keep those principles in mind. Number one, we don't want to admit when we've made a mistake. And number two, it's very hard to have these conversations in public settings. And so we've got to create opportunities for people to be able to disclose at their own level of comfort what's going on. The other point I made initially is also, again, something to emphasize. If the horse has left the barn, you got a problem, especially when the horse has run off to another country or to another state. And I was thinking what you had presented, a friend from the Northwestern DA's office. You know, if you're not in the jurisdiction, how are you going to enforce this? How are you even going to find out who the person is? And when you do, and you find out they're out of your jurisdiction, then you're kind of at a dead end. So it's all about prevention. And what I wanted to say to you is that, and this is another thing that went through my mind today. I hope you know I not only do not have a PowerPoint presentation, I'm doing a little stream of consciousness. I've got my bullet points of talking, but I'm pretty much responding to what I heard today. Because my mission is to underscore, frankly, a lot of the good points that have already been made, and I'm not going to repeat them. But I would say to you that the challenge that AARP sees is that the nature of this fraud is evergreen and it's changing, right? The issues that were presented 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you know, there were many of us in this room remember, hey, watch out for the one that knocks on your door and wants to dump a load of asphalt and do your driveway. I mean, how many of us heard that, right? Well, I don't know. They're not doing that as much these days. But even last month, right, there's another scheme that's come up. So AARP does it this way. We have this Fraud Watch Network. It is constantly refreshed. There are new scams that are disclosed, and we explain them. And so if you already are not aware, this is the brochure, the Fraud Watch, it's the handbook, but it references the Fraud Watch Network. So what we try to have all of our members do is just join the Fraud Watch Network, aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network, sign up, and you're going to get notices on a regular basis. By the way, this is what's going on in your area. And there was a comment made earlier today about how this can happen sporadically, and it might die back, and then all of a sudden it reoccurs. Why is that happening? Well, it's another point that I think has to be emphasized. If you're the scammer, you don't, frankly, mind sending a lot of emails. How much does that cost, right? You don't mind sending texts to millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people, or even making phone calls, robocalls, et cetera, because you just need to get one. And the odds are pretty good that if you hit, that one person with the life savings or, any number of thousands of dollars, that person's made more money than maybe they would be making legitimately in any other occupation. So the scammer's incentive is huge. And they don't mind that they have to keep it working on it. So I would just say that with the Fraud Watch Network, we are emphasizing that and keeping up to date. Another thing that comes to my mind, and it's been referenced today, it's called hijacking the amygdala, right? It's that portion of your brain that's visceral. Why does the IRS scam work? I mean, I suppose most of us realize it when you think about it, but it works because who the hell wants to get a call from the IRS? You immediately go, OMG, they found out. Even if you've done nothing, they found out. You took that deduction, you shouldn't have made it. Or if it's the grandparents thing, it's about the visceral. They know the name of that grandchild, right? They already know enough to be really dangerous. But the whole point is they want to go right after your emotion. They don't want you to think. They want it to be an urgent situation, and you have to reply not in a minute, but in 10 seconds or 15 seconds. And once they get you on that hook, the metaphor, you're on the hook, the worm's dangling, you bit it, now they start to reel. And so we also say, and I think it is really, really important, hang up, period. The longer you stay on the call, now they know they got a live one. You may hang up, but the longer you stay on, now all of a sudden your phone number is a good phone number to be shared in the dark web, because that's a real person at that phone number. So there's all these things. And again, I'm looking at this crowd. Half of you do this for a living, or at least you're consulting and engaging in this, so I'm not telling you anything new. But for those who may not be aware of it, the fact is, this is where the success happens. They are counting on you to viscerally react to something that human nature would tell you, you've got to act quickly. So we really preach the recognition that you never answer the phone of someone you don't recognize. I don't know about you, but I get calls all the time, right? So here's what I do. I have a simple rule. If somebody calls, I don't recognize the name, I let it go to voicemail. And then I will listen if there's a voicemail. The odds are extremely high that if it's a legitimate person, they're not going to leave a voicemail. And it's extremely high that if somebody needs to talk to me, they'll leave me a voicemail, and therefore I know I can take the initiative and I can call back. And I'm in control of that rather than reacting. And this simple fact that was made earlier today, 18 to 24-year-olds, they're the most likely victims. Well, logically, it's because they're very comfortable with the internet. Texting is how they communicate, God love them. Pick up the phone once in a while, call your grandmother, that kind of thing. They don't do that, but they love to text. And they click on those links because that's their world. But those links are, minefields, and they can blow up in your face. So we know that the lesson of that is, this is not a senior problem. And I say this from the perspective of AARP. We represent the 50 plus, but we have our, when I think about our members, we have 760,000 members just in Massachusetts. And many of them who are not yet members are in that place where they have their grandparents, their parents, their own kids, they're in the middle of all of that. And so when we emphasize things like how to help yourself as a caregiver, it's because it's intergenerational. And so this idea of preventing fraud is equally, in my opinion, intergenerational. We've got to get the message out to our grandkids about spotting the danger. And so I would make that as another point. The other thing I want to say, and it really was driven home by the group that was here, there are a lot of folks that are working hard to protect you, and that is a blessing. There is no doubt that the federal government, the state government, local law enforcement, and nonprofit organizations like AARP, and there are many others, our friends in the Medicare fraud prevention group, this is the blessing. And so what we know we need to do is to leverage each other's assets. That's one message I've always delivered whenever I've worked with older advocacy groups is no matter how strong AARP is or no matter how many members we have, we absolutely would be ineffective if we didn't work with the DAs, we didn't work with the Secretary of State, we didn't work with our friends in the federal government or the Attorney General right down the list. And this is really important too, because I would say to you that whenever you're trying to get your message out around fighting fraud, you should reach to the people you've seen today and use us. I'm gonna make that pitch to all of you because I have a feeling you'd feel the same way. AARP wants to be engaged as a means to delivering the message. We do teletown halls. In fact, I just wrote Mary. Where is Mary? Thank you, Mary, for saying, I think you said yes. So we do teletown halls. Have you ever heard of those? Some of you might have gone. All right, so we have these. Now, this sounds counterintuitive and actually almost undercuts a couple of more points I made today, but we call out to our members in robocalls saying, with my voice, not AI, but really me recording, saying, hey, we'd love you to stay on the line to listen to the Attorney General and yours truly talk about fraud prevention. All right? So we get thousands of people on a live telephone conversation. We do an hour conversation with the Attorney General or Mary, representing the Attorney General or Secretary of State, or, we've had a number of people in the business of doing this. And what what AARP is doing is we're delivering the audience, right? But the message is really critical. And I find it, I've done a lot of these over the 11 years I've been the state director. I'm amazed at the kinds of questions and the kinds of victimization and the stories. Now, maybe there's something to be said for being actually anonymous, right? Because we know their first name, we know the gist of their question, but that person will tell a story that'll break your heart. And the more we have these conversations, the more I feel like we're achieving our mission, which is to get the word out. So use AARP if you find yourself in a position where you want to get to other folks in the neighborhood to be part of this. Go to our Fraud Watch volunteers. And then I would just say to speak to the other branches of government and the other kinds of people that are doing, look at this now. See, I'm going to practice what I preach. Somebody called me, I've had it on silent, and they're leaving a voicemail, and I do not recognize this phone number. So I'm feeling real good about this. How's that? I'm sorry, Sandy, I'll call you later. I don't know what we're having for dinner. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. But obviously, this happened a lot too, right? We are just in this place where we have to recognize that we are family here. We are in this together. We have great assets to leverage, and we need to spread the word. And I want to thank the Pension Action Center, by the way, for sponsoring this. This is huge because you yourselves are on a mission to protect pensioners who might have gotten nothing had it not been for your efforts. So that's great work that is being done there. So I want to give that shout out. So I guess I don't want to go any longer. I want to stop here, and I want to see if the audience has any comments or questions. Oh, one other thing that just came up. Somebody mentioned this earlier. Just to be clear, I will be leaving the job on July 5th. And I'm leaving the job because I've got grandkids and other things I want to do. So if you're looking for a good job and you think maybe you could be standing up here next year, apply to our website, careers@aarp.org. What do you think of that? Yeah, but I'm still in the game, at least until July 5th. So somebody's got questions, comments. I'm looking out this audience. Most of you have actually been paying attention. Jonathan, I got to give a shout out. Jonathan Fielding is going to be talking later, right? You're going to be on the panel? What? Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Jonathan, who is by nature, frankly, much more reserved than certainly I am. But I knew Jonathan when I was Secretary of Elder Affairs. He was leading he was part of the team that was part of the Elder Protective Services Group. And it is important to acknowledge the Executive Officer of Elder Affairs and the Protective Services Network. All right, let's give a shout out to those people. And there is one last thing I suppose I should say, because nobody's asking a question yet. This no wrong door is a very important point. I worry most that the average person hanging out in East Boston at a coffee shop or wherever else they may be has no clue who to call or who to talk to about this subject. I worry about that because really we are talking to each other too much sometimes, right? We're not out there enough. So my thought is that the best thing we can do for our constituencies is to say it doesn't even matter who you call, as long as it's go to your senior center, go to your city hall, go to your little city hall, go to your town councilor, go to your local police department. Call or talk to anyone in the world that you engage in, because we should be, and I think we have done a good job, creating a network where if you can't solve the problem, you know who to call. They shouldn't have to worry about a checklist of all these places they've got to go. If it's a securities issue, I'll call the Attorney General's office. If it's something involving, larceny of something, you got to go to the DA. This is not fair to them. They just need someone to go to and talk to. And so I think our message has to be, it has to be one-stop shopping. And let's get the word out. It doesn't matter where you go, as long as you go to someone you trust. And that leaves me with one last thought. The network out there, we talk about mass home care and all of the elder protective services embedded in the home care network. We also have our friends in Mass Council on Aging. 350 communities. There's only one that doesn't have a council on aging. It's in your area, Monroe Village. They have no council on aging. I have no idea why, except they have 77 people, so that might be the reason. But every council on aging, is able to make the one call to help that person to the next steps. So, okay, I'm done, and I'm looking for okay, I've got a friendly face out there. You got a mic? I think there's a microphone coming.
Hi, so I'm an elder justice advocate here in the community in Boston through Hebrew Senior Life for the Center for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and Neglect. And the question I have is, how do we leverage police departments to take a report seriously? Because I had worked in the field for about 12 years before I started this role. And when I had to report financial abuse or fraud to a police department, usually they'll just say, actually just call the AG's office. So I'm just trying to see what is actually a good way to get our foot in the door. That's
an excellent question, and I have several responses. The first one is to acknowledge that going on record, calling a police department to report that you've been a victim of fraud is essential. You need to make that call. Now, if the police department is run in such a way that they will not take a call from a legitimate victim of a crime, something's wrong with that police department. It's entirely understandable, however, that in response to the report, they're going to refer you to another agency that might be collecting a series of complaints or victims similarly situated to develop a better case. Because a lot of times these are, these are scammers that are hitting a number of people at the same time. So I would say to you this: you should never be treated. I'm really saddened to hear this, but I think every police department needs to be taking a report. That's their requirement. Now, the other thing they may do, which is kind of the message I gave at the beginning of this conversation, is there's not much we can do about this. You've just told us that you wired $5,000 to somebody in Cameroon. That jurisdiction doesn't extend that far. So you probably should call the Attorney General's office. I mean, they're not being rude, they're just being real. So, however, if you live in the town of Newton and you're a constituent, you have every right to have the police department in Newton say, let me take your name and report, what are the details? And then that's the department, will help move this to the right place, et cetera, et cetera. Any other questions? Hey, I just checked my phone and I'm like 2 minutes on time. It's 1:13, I'm supposed to stop at 1:15, so you got time for one last question, comment. Oh, there you go.
Are you still doing your model ships?
Yes. I have 3 hobbies. I'm a gardener, which is why I'm doing the green thing, celebrating the spring. I have goats and chickens. I build model ships in the winters. And the latest hobby is collecting ancient Roman coins. So I'll leave it at that. Plenty to do after July, let's just say that. Thanks for asking. And I do want to say, John Ford's here. John's a celebrity in my world. He doesn't like that I'm pointing at him. He's putting his head down. That's fine. John Ford is a lawyer who is legendary as an advocate for seniors. I love him. I respect him. He's been fighting the good fight for a few years, and I just want to say thank you. 52 years. All right, so there you go. So John Ford, we're all in this together. We're really family. I'm delighted to have been invited to come, and I think I'm going to hit it right on 1:15. So thank you very much.
So now we're going to move to our first panel of the afternoon, updates from the Massachusetts Securities Division and the Attorney General's Office, abusing new technologies, cryptocurrency, and other challenging issues. Our moderator will be Mary Freely, Deputy Chief of the Healthcare and Fair Competition Bureau, Sally Ann Nelligan, Director of the Financial Investigations Division, Criminal Bureau, Lila Dubois, Assistant Attorney General, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Peter W. Cassidy, Associate Director and Chief of Corporate Finance, Massachusetts Securities Division.
I wanted to thank Mike for covering so many topics that really go well with our panel. My name is Mary Freely. I am an Assistant Attorney General at the Office of AG Andrea Campbell. I am the Deputy Chief of our Healthcare and Fair Competition Bureau, but more germane to today's presentation, I'm going to be the Director of our Elder Justice Unit, which is in the process of being built out, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm pleased to be here today with 2 of my colleagues, Sally Ann Nelligan, who is the Director of our Financial Investigations Division of the Attorney General's Office, and Sally Ann will talk a little bit about some of the work that she does in the investigations field on a lot of these financial type scams. Lilia Dubois is with our Insurance and Financial Services Division. She's another Assistant Attorney General. And we're also pleased to be joined by Peter Cassidy from our Massachusetts Securities Division. He's the Associate Director and Chief of Corporate Finance at the Securities Division. I want to thank the Pension Action Council and the Securities Division for sponsoring this event. I feel like in some ways we're preaching to the choir because so many of us are in this field, and those older adults that are here today to learn a lot, congratulations for being here. You you're taking a right step. There's so much of this fraud and scams out there that we're happy to tell you a little bit about it in a way that hopefully you can pass it on to your friends and your relatives. So I'm going to start with my slides. Here we go. I'm going to talk briefly about our Elder Justice Unit, because as Mike Festa was saying, if you're a person who comes into trouble either because of a grandparent scam or someone who's in effect taken advantage of your good nature, oftentimes you don't know where to turn. You don't know if you should call the Attorney General's office, the Securities Division, the Federal Trade Commission. Who do you call? Do you call the police department? Yes, all of the above. But Attorney General Campbell, and I think there we go. Attorney General Campbell, when she was campaigning for her role, she heard from she heard from elders, she heard from older adults who didn't know who to call at the AG's office, who to call, at the police department. And what she wanted to form was an elder justice unit that would be kind of a one-stop shop, so that if you had a problem, we could connect you with resources that might be able to solve your problem. I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework for our office. Our first slide is the Attorney General's office is an advocate and a resource for all residents of our state. We do consumer protection, we combat fraud and corruption, we investigate and prosecute crimes, we protect the environment, we protect workers' rights and civil rights. But that's a big office. So the Elder Justice Unit is going to help connect to all of those. Here's the way that the office is organized and how we work. We do investigations, we do enforcement, we try to do prevention, and in particular on this topic, we have a wonderful community engagement division, and a shout out to Umu Sharif, who's in our audience. Our community engagement division goes out to councils on aging and other centers to do some of this education work that we're doing today about what kind of scams are out there, how not to fall for them, how to just hang up the phone, because the fraudsters are very convincing, and we don't want you to lose any money to those folks. And we do a lot of policy work as well, working with our legislature. Let's see, how are we organized? Here we go. We're organized into 6 bureaus. We have an executive bureau, a public protection and advocacy bureau, and that's where our consumer protection division is. Our consumer advocacy and response division. So if you file a consumer complaint with the office, it's going to go there first. And they'll assist consumers with issues you have. Our criminal bureau, our healthcare and fair competition bureau, that houses a healthcare division that also has mediators that can help with billing disputes if your insurance company isn't properly processing your bills. We have a government bureau that defends our state agencies in litigation. And we have an energy and environmental bureau, which does a lot of ratepayer advocacies. So if your electric bills are high, they're the ones that are trying to advocate on behalf of consumers. We have several locations. We have a main office in Boston, offices in New Bedford, Springfield, and Worcester. And the Elder Justice Unit was created by A.G. Campbell last year. The mission of the Elder Justice Unit is to advance the rights of older adults in Massachusetts to live with dignity and to remain in their communities free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So we're talking about the exploitation today. Abuse and neglect, our Medicaid fraud unit handles abuse and neglect cases in long-term care facilities and in the community. So that's another part of our office that often people don't know where to turn. So the Elder Justice Unit is going to promote the safety and well-being of older adults through our enforcement actions, through our legislative advocacy, public education at events such as this, and our collaboration with stakeholder agencies and organizations, many of whom are here today. I'm happy to see them. I'm going to skip over this slide because Sally Ann's going to cover how we do some of our work and how we learn about some of our cases. The areas of the work that we do are unfair and deceptive acts and practices, insurance and financial investments, and Lily's going to talk about some of the work of our office on that. Consumer scams and identity theft. Again, our Consumer Advocacy and Response Division is the first stop for consumer complaints about these things. Crimes against the elderly, our Medicaid fraud unit, as well as our Criminal Bureau, have jurisdiction to prosecute crimes against older adults. And our Medicaid fraud division handles, as I mentioned, abuse and neglect in nursing homes. So what we've been talking about today is financial exploitation in many of its forms. We define it as the illegal or improper use of an older person's funds, property, or assets that includes getting access to those funds through a scam. Perpetrators, unfortunately, range from close family members who often take advantage of some of their relatives' financial bank accounts, et cetera, to offshore scammers. And in the case of scammers, calling from offshores, it's very hard, as you've heard, to recover those funds once they're gone. There are recent reports that identify financial exploitation as the most prevalent type of elder abuse. And this is a slide, I believe it's from the FTC. So it's just what we view as the way to prevent scams. The way to educate people is about prevention of scams, because you just need to know what's out there in order to give yourself an opportunity to fight back before they take your money. And we're going to hear about some of these scams. You've heard about the imposter scams and the romance scams. They're ever-changing, and they don't just affect older adults. You know, these scams, a lot of younger people are a victim to some of these scams. Just a few red flags. If you're asked to wire money for a family member in jeopardy, we've heard about that, it's a scam. If you're asked to buy a prepaid gift card, it's a scam. Okay. If you win a prize, but you're asked to pay up front first for taxes or other things, it's most likely a scam. If a website asks you to download software, that's a problem. It's a scam. If people ask you for your usernames, passwords, and account numbers, it's a scam. And I'll just briefly touch upon a story. My mother's 90 years old. I went over to her house one day, and she was on the phone with what we thought was her Chase credit card security office. And she had her credit card out in front of her. And at one point, I said, "Mom, do you want me to get on the phone?" So I got on the line. These folks had me on the line for several minutes, back and forth, telling me I needed to give them information. And it wasn't until my mother's cell phone rang with a ping. She was texted, and they had a code that they were asking us for on her cell phone. And thank goodness, I'm reading the code on the phone with the scammers. They're asking me for this number, and I saw that the credit card company, through their security mechanism, said, "We will never call you for this code." And yet I was being asked for the code, and that made me wake up and hang up the phone. So we hung up the phone on the scammers. We called the credit card company. They had access to her number, and we shut down the account. But they're very convincing, and as the callers earlier were saying, they give you a false sense of urgency. They don't give you time to really think about what's going on. So I just wanted to touch on, before I turn it over to Sally Ann, some of our investigative tools. In a civil case, we have civil investigative demands, which are the ability to ask companies for information before we file a lawsuit. And that's a great advantage to have, to be able to find out how they operate in their businesses. We can take depositions, meaning we can ask a company to come in and ask them questions before we file a lawsuit. In the criminal context, we have other opportunities to file grand jury subpoenas, search warrants, and we have a digital crime lab in our office that helps obtain cell phone information and that type of thing. We have a very broad statute in Massachusetts called our Consumer Protection Act, which is Chapter 93A. It says that unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive acts or practices in the conduct of any trade or commerce are unlawful. That's a really broad definition of unfair conduct, and that's why we can go after companies. I'll tell you that the scammers that call usually don't register with the Secretary of State's office, but we can try to go after them as well. We also have criminal statutes that allow for our jurisdiction to go after individuals that commit abuse or neglect on older adults. So I'm just going to put up some information, some resources. These are numbers that were probably in some of the other materials. I will say that the AARP table, as well as the Mass Securities Division table, has some great resources available to you right over here on this side of the room. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sally Ann, who's going to talk about financial investigations. Thanks. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody, and happy spring. Mike was right. Today is the first day of spring, I think, or later tonight. So it is my true pleasure to be here with all of you today. As Mary said, my name is Sally Ann Nelligan, and I have the honor of serving as the Director of the Financial Investigations Division in the Criminal Bureau from Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell. I've held that position since 1998, where I've been involved in that division since then. I joined the leadership team about 12 or 13 years ago, and I oversee the division now. And so what we do in the Criminal Bureau as financial investigators is we partner with the prosecutors in our office, as well as the state police, victim advocates, and paralegals, and we investigate and prosecute crimes that involve financial exploitation. We also work on human trafficking investigations and various other larceny. I have a long history of sort of working on cases that involve vulnerable populations, and that being one of those groups is older folks that are in our neighborhoods. We, as financial investigators, we're responsible for gathering all those records that are going to prove our case. So we're going to get the bank records and the credit card records and the cell phone records, and then we're going to examine all of those records and try to follow the flow of the money so that we can prove those allegations against that criminal, hold them accountable, and hopefully put them in jail for what they've done. Underneath all of that financial crime is the senior or the elder financial exploitation, or older Americans that fall into that sort of category of those that financial exploitation. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are just areas where we look at elder protection work. So prior to our elder justice unit that Mary mentioned that was created under Andrea Campbell, our Massachusetts AG, we had a working elder protection group in our office that was across bureaus and across divisions, where we met sort of collaboratively and to discuss case by case sort of what's the best way to handle these situations. My whole background has always been in criminal prosecution work. And like I said, we work with the prosecutors in our office as investigators. But as Mike said earlier, we're not going to be able to prosecute ourselves out of every single matter. And every single matter isn't that easy to prosecute, especially if a defendant or a target is out of state or out of the country. It makes it all that more difficult. But there are other ways that we can put together our collaboration and figure out what's the best step or the best next step for each case that's in front of us. That's where you all and we all should be joining together as partners. We partner in the Financial Investigations Division with banks and credit unions. I would never have had any success at all in my career if not for partnering with financial institutions and sharing sort of information that we can to help protect these vulnerable groups. Rachel's in the audience. I met her. She was an adult protective service worker. Awesome. You all do such awesome work. And we met at a networking group that I'm a member of that had law enforcement, both state and local and federal. We sat right next to each other and just sort of started collaborating about how can we partner together to make it better. We talked about her role. She taught me what they do. She sits down with folks and helps them navigate the IC3. That's the FBI's database that will collect those complaints. She helps folks navigate that really sort of challenging situation to enter in all that information. That's what we should be doing. The woman's question back there about the police departments, ask for a supervisor, because a police department should be taking a report at the very least, because insurance companies and other entities that are involved in this work require a police report. So ask for a supervisor, because that's unacceptable that a local police department wouldn't take that report. It's just so important that everybody collaborate, even folks outside of the work that we do with prosecution work. We have some tools that we can use in the AG's office that are effective in the Criminal Bureau for helping us investigate and prosecute our cases. Like I said, before Mary's unit, the Elder Justice Unit, was created, we had a working group across the office, and we used to meet with all older American, older adult groups that were interested, lawyers from all different aspects of the work. And we get our cases, somebody could call up and let us know that they were victimized. You could call into one of our consumer complaint lines. Sometimes people call me directly. I gave my card earlier today to one of our wonderful volunteers at the AARP. I have gotten calls from constituents and tried to jump in where we could to try to help. And we've been successful in lots of different cases, something that was even $400 that somebody was missing in a senior center. And we went out and met with them, and I worked with the bank, and we were able to get the money back. So there are ways that we can help outside of prosecuting everything. So some of the tools that we use in our criminal cases is, Mary had mentioned earlier, grand jury subpoenas. We work with the state police, who will draft search warrants to try to, maybe grab any of the funds that are still exist in a bank account. We partner with our digital evidence crime lab that can do an analysis of somebody's phone or computer. And one of the big ways is through FinCEN. That's an acronym for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. So what you may or may not know is at your bank, you have a bank account. If the bank deems there's some suspicious activity going on, they're required by law to file reports. 2 of those reports that they file are a suspicious activity report and a currency transaction report. And those are meant to help you as a customer. And we in law enforcement look through those reports, and we try to find a bank that may have written something down that they deemed something suspicious. So those are tools that we use that might end up in a case. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on earlier that didn't get mentioned that I think is sort of worth mentioning. One of this is, and this did get covered, but know this and spread the word. No legitimate business or government agency is ever going to ask you to pay by a gift card. It doesn't exist. Or any form of cryptocurrency. Government agencies are not gonna expect you to pay in cryptocurrency. That's a fact. Also, when you're gonna write checks, a lot of us still write checks. My parents write checks to pay their bills, right? Go to a mailbox within the post office and mail it. Mail is being stolen at an alarming rate at standalone post office boxes that are on your street corner. I helped my 92-year-old uncle navigate that exact situation. And luckily, I'm in the business. I knew what needed to be done. I contacted the bank. I helped him fill out an affidavit, and the bank reimbursed his money because it wasn't his fault that his check to Verizon for $45 ended up being washed and written out for $9,500. So I helped him. I was grateful that I had that knowledge, and the bank reimbursed his $9,500. So I'm on my parents, who are both in their 80s, every day. Do not answer the phone. Numbers on caller IDs can be spoofed. If you don't know the number, if it's not myself or one of my sisters calling or your grandchildren, don't pick up the phone. Prevention is key. I agree with Mary and everyone else in that room. I would love to bring back those public service announcements that I used to see on the TV when I was a kid, because I think getting people, when they're watching the news like I watch, or they're watching Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, getting the message out is key. Like education and prevention. You know, how are we going to address the problem? By having this meeting today is one of those ways. We're all here together. We're trying to figure out what's the best approach and what's the next step. Your community folks are here, Adult Protective Services folks, interagency, Secretary of State is here, people from the FTC are here, the DA's office is here. We're all here because we have a common goal of helping older folks and younger folks. They're quite frankly duped by this. And I just want to talk about one case that I was really proud of, that I got the opportunity to work on. It all started because of a suspicious activity report that a bank filed. So a credit union filed a report on a woman who was the office manager at a nursing home. She was in her 40s, had been in the nursing home for about 9 years. All of a sudden, she changed and pivoted and started stealing from the funds of the clients who were living in that nursing home. She would steal from their personal needs account. She would take the credit card that was part of the nursing home and use that. The nursing home administrator failed in his job. Had he looked at one credit card statement or one bank account statement for the facility, he would have noticed what was going on. But he failed in his job. Therefore, she continued to steal. If not for a really astute bank investigator who noticed this activity, all of these checks, in addition to her payroll, were being paid to her. Thousands and thousands of dollars. They wrote a suspicious activity report. It came across my desk. I noticed it. I took pause, and I spoke to my supervisors, and we opened up an investigation. And with the collaboration of our prosecutors in the Criminal Bureau and the state police, we interviewed the woman at the nursing home. She admitted it. We got all the documents, and we prosecuted her, and she went to state prison for about 1.5 years. That's actually good for us, because a lot of the financial crimes, you don't get that kind of a sentence. But I just want you all to know, and I want to echo whoever said, we all do have a role in this, and we all have to partner together, and we're not going to prosecute ourselves out of this. So I thank you for your time, and I really appreciate all of you showing up here, and thanks for the Pension Action Committee for inviting us. And next up is, thank you so much, appreciate it. Sorry, honey. Next up is my colleague Lilia Dubois, who's from our Insurance and Financial Services Department at the AG's office. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Just a quick introduction to the Insurance and Financial Services Division. So IFSD protects consumers from unfair and deceptive practices in the investment industry, including okay. Insurance and Financial Services Division protects consumers from unfair and deceptive practices in the investment industry, including in cryptocurrency. And people who believe that they were a victim of an investment fraud or a cryptocurrency scam can file a request for assistance through our mediation program. We have been seeing pretty alarming trends through the complaints that have been filed through this mediation program. we've seen an increasing number, an alarmingly increasing number in the complaints related to crypto. So in 2023, the volume of those crypto-related complaints was up 167% compared to 2022. The median amount consumers report losing to a crypto scam is $29,000. And what's even more concerning is that based on the statistic that we've collected through our IFSD's mediation program, 55% of these complaints were submitted by people who were 60 and over. So what type of complaints do we see impacting older adults most frequently? They are investment scams, romance scams, and impersonation scams. Some of you are familiar with the terms, but I'll just give a brief explanation on how they're operated. So both investment and romance scams start in a very similar pattern. A victim gets either a text message or a message through a social or networking website like LinkedIn or Tinder or Facebook, and then they start a conversation of some sort. If it's an investment scam, the person who is approaching the victim usually gives a sales pitch during which they claim that they're an investment guru and can introduce you to this investment strategy that will guarantee you huge profits within days. In a romance scam, the pattern is pretty similar, but the scammer typically starts with a romantic relationship, and they have conversations that are more personal in nature, and then they use the trust that they build to convince the person to invest in crypto. The next step is usually the victims are told to open an account through the scammer's website. Sometimes the portal is available through a phone app. And then they're told to fund it through either cryptocurrency exchange or through a crypto kiosk. Then this is where they introduce the bulletproof investment strategy and teach you how to trade. And then, of course, every trade is a winner, and people see through their scammers' accounts huge profits within a matter of days. And this incentivizes people to invest more and more and more. Unfortunately, all of these trades and all these platforms are totally fake, as well as the profits that the victims are seeing. So this is just a way for the scammers to get money out of you and have the funds trapped in their wallets. So in an impersonation scam, a victim usually gets a phone call, and the person on the other line claims to be someone from either law enforcement or the IRS or a pension agency or another company of that nature. And then they claim that you have an outstanding debt, which needs to be immediately settled. And then they usually guide the person to go to the closest crypto kiosk, and they stay with you on the phone, and that's called the mobile escort. Once the person is at the crypto kiosk, they're given step-by-step instructions on how to pay the debt, which is actually sending crypto to the scammer's wallet. So what is it that you can do to spot and avoid crypto scams? You've heard a lot of great tips, and I just second that. But one thing that I want to reiterate over and over, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I have a quick video that I want to show you.
I'm desperate to see him. We've been chatting for months. The returns he promises are so high. And I really know a lot about crypto. Something doesn't feel right. He's really pushing me to invest all of a sudden. Scams can happen to anyone, but I will not
done with scams. Learn more tips to protect yourself on the Safety Center at chainabuse.com.
What can IFSD do for you to help you if you are a victim of a crypto scam? So in the best case scenario, what we can do, we can trace the funds that was stolen from you. We can trace the stolen crypto using blockchain analytics tools. And again, in the best case scenario, it lands with an exchange that cooperates with the US law enforcement. In these situations, we can first freeze the funds that was stolen, and then during the pendency of the freeze, we commence an action against the scam operation and obtain a judgment that will allow us to go back to that exchange and ask for the return of they give the funds to us for us to distribute to the victims. And one most recent success story, just 2 weeks ago, we have obtained a judgment in a case like that where an 80-year-old veteran will be receiving $140,000 that he lost in a romance scam. It was pretty much all of his savings. So in a situation where we trace the funds to an exchange that does not cooperate with the US law enforcement, and this is usually either a decentralized exchange or an exchange that's overseas that basically is saying, you know, you have no jurisdiction over us, we're not going to cooperate with you. We cannot return the funds to the consumers, unfortunately. But we can still disrupt the scammers' operations by disabling their website, and this is what we have successfully been doing. Important thing to note here that our success rate is much higher if we know of the scam sooner. If the scam is ongoing, it increases our likelihood of being able to seize the funds. So if you are a victim of a crypto scam, or if you know someone who is a victim of a crypto scam, tell them to come to us as quickly as possible, file a complaint through our website, call our hotline, we're there to help.
Thank you, Lilia. Can I be heard? All right. Anyways, thanks so much, and good afternoon. My name is Peter Cassidy. I'm here from the Massachusetts Securities Division, part of the Secretary of State's office, Secretary Galvin's office. And I just want to say a bit about what the Securities Division does. Our focus is on the offer and sale of securities. Broker-dealers who do business in Massachusetts, big and small, have to register along with their sales personnel. The same story with investment advisors. They also have to register in order to do business here, so you should be very watchful about doing business with unregistered professionals. When the agency receives complaints, the division has investigative powers. We can require people to give testimony under oath and to produce documents. And we can take action against potential violations of the Securities Act. The civil enforcement powers we have include substantial fines up to $25,000 per violation, the ability to order people to cease and desist from violating the act, and other sorts of remedial actions. We talked a lot about cryptocurrency. I think the famous example that people have heard about is Bitcoin, but a more generic definition of a virtual currency is that it's a currency that exists only electronically on the internet and can be purchased by your phone, computer, or at a crypto ATM, which you've heard a lot about today. The best known examples are Bitcoin and Ethereum, but in fact there are many dozens, perhaps many hundreds of other potentially more obscure, less well-known cryptocurrencies and other sorts of assets, sometimes described as crypto coins, sometimes described as non-fungible tokens. But a very frequent pattern with these sorts of assets is that they go through a promotional period where there's a tremendous effort made to drum up interest through a variety of channels, that the price gets boosted up rather abruptly. The people who are behind the offering sell out around the apex of the price, and then there's an abrupt crash. It's very much in line with what happens with certain penny stocks. One thing also just to note is that the State Securities Act can specifically reach cryptocurrency, but we can also reach other sorts of exotic investments as well. Things like pyramid schemes, Ponzi schemes, and also things with just weird nomenclature, like somebody tries to sell you a profit participation certificate that's quite possibly a security, and the Securities Division will be a place to file a complaint with. Let's see. The Securities Division has a pretty long history, actually, of doing actions against crypto assets that are being sold as unregistered investments, including a sweep that we did in 2018, which involved 5 cryptocurrencies, which have basically been washed out of the marketplace into obscurity. One of them was a crypto coin called Caviar, which was specifically marketed to members of the Russian community. So sometimes the affinity fraud can take very particular and quirky forms. 2024, this year, we took an action against a national firm selling unregistered securities. 2023, the Securities Division took action against a firm that was functioning basically as a crypto bank, asking people to put their cryptocurrency on deposit. They would get interest, but there were no banking standards behind it, and even though it was functioning like a bank, it was not a bank. In 2022, we did an action against a cryptocurrency offering a purported Bitcoin miner that involved people who had historically been involved in penny stock scams. They're actually barred from the industry, and so they basically got involved in crypto mining. And there are a series of ongoing investigations now with respect to the crypto space. Some of the hallmarks of crypto fraud have been highlighted here. These assets tend to be even the well-known crypto assets tend to be highly volatile. They're famous for that. But also, oftentimes they're sold on the basis of exaggerated claims, what amounts to pump and dump marketing, sometimes claims that the crypto is actually safer than conventional currency or sounder. Oftentimes, we've seen crypto assets being marketed to populations that have perhaps been financially disadvantaged in the past. This is a way to build generational wealth. This is a way to get a leg up and accumulate savings you otherwise wouldn't be able to accumulate. And very often, there have been affinity fraud type ties with respect to crypto assets. Older investors, the profile has been that there's been a significant predominance of older investors in this group. They have accumulated savings. There may be vulnerability on a number of reasons. And also, for some folks in the more senior ages, there is a greater willingness to trust and a greater disposition to trust. These are all reasons to be particularly vigilant. And again, just some hallmarks of crypto scams that we've seen. Promise of sometimes astronomical returns, maybe coupled with claims of little or no risk. This is a sure thing. The channel of the pitch can come through social media, can come through email, can come through text, but also sort of curveball things like professional networking sites or even dating apps. And again, the tactics can vary. Oftentimes, we have seen affinity fraud, we have seen romance scams, financial empowerment type language, but also if you go to certain websites where, for instance, stocks are discussed, there'll be a person who purports to be an investor very much like yourself, and he or she is saying, I've had great success with this, I recommend this to you, and you may think you're dealing with a peer. This is a bit of a slogan, but investigate before you invest. Slow down, don't be pressured, take your time. One thing that's the case is that aggressive salespeople will sometimes look for an opportunity to promote their businesses, whether they're licensed professionals or not, going to a library, going to a senior center. I'd like specifically to tell the folks who are involved in things like senior centers and councils on aging, you can contact the Securities Division. You can look at the background of somebody who's offering to come talk to your organization. Do they have a disciplinary history? Did they used to be licensed as a broker or as an investment advisor? There's staff from the registration section at the information table. You could make contact with them today, potentially. So I would encourage that. And we have significant databases that we can tap into. For many decades of information in a brokerage database called the CRD, the Central Registration Depository. There's a parallel database for investment advisors. But very often when people go to do a check, they'll find that the person who is pitching an investment or offering his or her advice is actually somebody who is not registered at all, or somebody who may have been forced out of the industry because of disciplinary problems. And I just wanted to give some information about filing a complaint with the Securities Division. We can be reached by phone. We have a toll-free number. If you Google up the Secretary of State's office, you'll get quickly to the Securities Division. We have an online complaint form. And also, if you don't have a complaint as such to file, but you think that there's something going on, the Securities Division would like to hear about that and would welcome your input. So.
I just want to read one final quote. Thank you, Peter, so much for that. I just want to read one final quote. I didn't say this during my original thing. So recently I read an article in the Washington Post by Michelle Singletary. It struck me. It's entitled, "Remember, none of us are too clever to be conned." Con artists also lean into folks' fear factor. The more panicked the target, the better odds of success. We silence victims by shaming them. We need more people willing to come forward to help combat this epidemic of financial crimes. But they won't talk about how they fell for the fraud if we are judgmental. Every story serves as a caution for others. So put your smugness away, because the swindles are becoming more elaborate, and you may find you're not too clever to be conned. So just, I leave you with that.
Hi, thank you so much for all your information. My question is to crypto. Is there another word or language that if they do call to elders, whatever the word is that they're using, that people seem to be getting caught? No, it's just crypto and that's,
Maybe Bitcoin, yeah.
sorry?
Bitcoin.
Or Bitcoin,
Yeah, I
okay.
think there'll oftentimes be comparisons to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is sort of the apex of the pyramid, and then there's this large population of pretty obscure coins, and often it's like saying this stock is going to be the next Apple computer, or this is going to be the next IBM, as the case may be. So that's oftentimes the edge, sort of the tip of the pitch.
Okay, and the second part was, I'm hearing the newest thing is if you get the phone call, folks are on the other end saying, "Can you hear me?" And if we say yes, that gives them permission to then tap into everything else? Is that a truth, or?
Well, that's all they need to then manufacture your voice after that and use it for AI purposes. All you have to do is just respond with yes, and then they can create you talking to anybody else as you.
Okay,
So this is
so-
something to be aware of.
Yep, so like the president of AARP said, you don't know the number, you don't pick it up, you let it go. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
I would just say that in terms of how I react to a question like that, they'll call up and say, "Mary?" And I'll say, "Who is this?" That's how I respond to people I don't know usually.
And what do you want?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, all of you. Mary, I missed your slide with your contact information. Could that be put back up? Thank you.
Sure.
The remote's right
Oh,
there.
sorry. Let's see. We'll go back. Contact, let's see. Is that it? There we go. Another question?
I do, I just want to take a picture. Hi, thank you guys. So my question is, we talked a lot about like the Bitcoin kiosks, cryptocurrency kiosks, because I've had my own experience in protective services, even most recently with elders who are actually asked to go to these kiosks. And I wondered, my first thought was, what real investor in crypto is actually going to these kiosks? And of course, in my protective service mind, doing this for so long, I immediately thought, like, are these really for real investors, or is this just something different? I wondered if the Attorney General Office has thought about this, and if there's any thoughts of, I don't know, lobbying or something against those, because the couple cases that I've been into, I mean, the individual, I didn't know there was an actual term for it. There was a term where they stay on the phone with you. That whole time, stayed on the phone with this individual, and she was a 60-year-old, very smart, just retired as a physical therapist. Like, she fell for this, and it was $67,000 putting into this Bitcoin machine between two machines. So I try to kind of talk about it with my agency, but I didn't know if there's anything that you guys are doing on that thought.
My simple answer is no.
Not yet.
No, meaning there are no legitimate investors. Yeah.
Right.
No,
Oh,
no.
yeah, yeah.
This is the answer. I mean, if you're talking to the industry, they'll try to convince you otherwise, but I'm not yet convinced. So we are working, we're obviously looking at the industry in general, and then we are working on some legislative steps to sort of create hurdles for these crypto kiosk operators to allow the use of those machines by the scammers for the most part. So yeah, it's in the works, and then anybody who would be willing to help us to kind of push the right people in the right direction to have this legislation passed, we're here to talk.
I would agree. Just a minor and practical point about crypto kiosks. It's famously an expensive way. Like people who are looking for a cost-effective way to invest in crypto, they're not going through those kiosks. The markup is high going in, it's high going out.
Don't use them.
There we go.
In a gas station, at a supermarket, there's no, what we can say, legit reason for doing that. And once the money's in there, it's in there and it's most likely gone. Thank you, everyone.
I have a question. These cards that they advertise, the days, what's the other one with the seats? Cash App and things like that. Are those all legit?
Cash App? Yeah, those are legitimate.
The Dave card?
What's the Dave card?
Zello?
Oh, Zello is legit too, but they're often used by the scammers to make you invest an account with them using those legitimate exchanges.
So just don't use them.
Well, I can't.
Cautiously.
Well, use them cautiously, right? If you find yourself in a scenario where someone is introducing you to a platform online that promises you that, in the most recent case that I'm working on, it was if you hold up, so all you had to do was bet up or down that Bitcoin is going to go either up or down, and hold that position for 30 seconds, you're going to make 50% on holding that position for 30 seconds. I mean, it's absurd, but it's sort of, someone mentioned it to me, people feel like they're hypnotized. I feel there is some level of conviction, whatever tools that they're using. So if you find yourself in a scenario where, someone is introducing you to this trading strategy and tells you to go to either Coinbase or Cash App or Crypto.com to fund that account, you're probably being scammed.
I mean, they're legitimate, right? PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, Cash App. They're used predominantly by a lot of criminals. So you just have to be cautious of them. They're real and they exist and they're not a scam, but they're being used by the scammers. So you just have to be cautious, same way when you mail a check. You just have to be cautious and know that they're sort of cloud-based. If they crash, any money that you have in Venmo or Cash App is going to be gone. But they are attached to your bank accounts and they are attached to credit cards, but you just have to be cautious. Personally, I don't use them because I don't know enough about them and I don't want to lose my money.
So I think a good distinction is going to be, if your friend has a Zello account and you have a Zello account, if you exchange funds between you and the person you personally know, that's fine. Right. But if you got a message through Facebook and someone told you, hey, I know of this amazing trading opportunity that's going to give you 200% returns, send money to this account through Zello, don't.
Yeah, that's a great point. Send it to people that you know and that you've met in person. Okay. We're way over, right?
Another question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we've heard that if somebody reaches out, if somebody reaches out a scammer reaches out and we even answer, they can use that to generate a voice. Is there anything else that just reaching out, can they do that and access data on your computer by just texting you and you answer, or something? Do they gain access to your
Not unless you
information?
click on a link that then
Okay.
allows them to get into your computer, right?
Otherwise, they can't access
No.
information stored like
You
passwords
have to give
and
them
so
that access. So they might send you a link that then
Yeah.
accesses your computer.
on. Okay.
Yeah. Scammers recently have been actively using Telegram. It's like WhatsApp or Viber, or it's a messaging app. And that app allows them to take control over your phone.
So don't use Telegram.
Yeah, Telegram, probably stay away from it.
Thank you, everyone. What do you got? All right. We've been waiting for you all day.
So, first of all, what happened to the manual? What happened to the manual that we used to have, where you did things on a regular phone, you dial a number and stuff like that? We've gone from, I guess it might be ancient time, that is, but that worked. I didn't see why, So now here we are, because they updated, right? And now we're in crisis. We got all this stuff going on, and we still continue to have it going on, and they want everything to be done online. So we are actually giving these people the hands up to do all these crimes
Right.
to us. So how do we fix that?
Go back to 1970.
Right?
Just a,
Well, I think one
We have to
thing.
be more alert, right?
Well, I think what you should be aware of is that when you are having trouble with your online account, try to find a legitimate phone number for the company that you are dealing with and try calling them. Because there are also those scams where, you look for customer service for Coinbase, for example, and it takes you to a fake Coinbase customer service website. And instead of, resolving your issue with Coinbase, you're giving these scammers access to your entire computer. So if you're dealing with a legitimate business, instead of performing those transactions or whatever issue you have dealing with them, instead of using the online option, call their legitimate phone number, the number that you have on your credit card.
Right, take it back to 1970, right?
Yeah.
and I know we're done, but just a mundane point. Secretary Galvin has actually been a big advocate for you saying no. If you're asked to give your social security number and there seems to be no practical need, try not to give it. Try saying no. Say I'll identify myself some other way. And if they're trying to make you migrate online, you may have an opportunity to say no, but they're not making it easy for you. So you should, you might be able to stay with some of the old channels.